Great. Thank you so much, John, for the kind introduction. I'm very excited to be moderating the first panel on support, funding, and collaboration. We have representatives from the Illinois University, SPECTRA, and the Undergraduate Research Journal at the University of Tennessee. To kick us all off, I would like each of you to briefly talk about the focus of your journal, your role in the journal, and one goal that you have for your journal. We can start with Dipankar, then go to Elhom, and end with Tyler.
Of course. Thank you so much, Breanna. The Illinois Student Undergraduate Research Journal is a multidisciplinary and collaborative journal for the undergraduate students at the University of Illinois. My role in the journal specifically is the founder of the IlSurge Journal. And so with that being said, coordinating everything from funding to students, as well as finding graduate students and professors to help us and support us through the journal itself. One goal I have for the journal is keeping the journal alive for years to come and to keep it at the front of the undergraduate research face of our R1 institution. And that being said, promoting collaboration, promoting curiosity within the undergraduate campus, as well as the graduate and professor campus.
Great. Thanks, Dipankar. My name's Merinda Hensley. I'm also at the University of Illinois, and I am a faculty librarian who supports undergraduate research journals at our institution. My job is the research programs liaison and instruction librarian, but I've been supporting undergraduate research journals for over a decade. And we started off with disciplinary journals at Illinois, and we have 5 active ones right now, and we have 2 that are in progress that should be publishing their first issue here in the coming weeks. And one of my goals for the journal is to make sure that all of the editors, as they come and go over the years, are familiar with the peer review process and that they can participate in peer review according to the guidelines and the procedures that are outlined for this specific journal. And then I also make sure that our issues are archived in our institutional repository as well. I'm glad to be here, everyone.
Yeah, I can jump in. Thank you so much, everyone, for putting this together and for just inviting me to participate in this. So I'm Elhom. I'm one of the co-editors of SPECTRA. SPECTRA is a theory journal affiliated with the Aspect program here at Virginia Tech, but technically separate, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We are potentially a little bit distinct here, I think, from the other 2 journals in the sense that we are not a student journal, we are a student-run journal. And so the distinction there for us is that the program Aspect does provide the editors for SPECTRA. We're all PhD students or candidates. However, the publications are not just student publications. We are open for everything from PhD students through to, full tenured emeritus faculty. We also don't actually do undergraduate research. It is just graduate research or above. So I'm going to say we a lot. My co-editor couldn't be here, but I'm speaking on behalf of both of us. So we are co-editors for a 1-year issue. SPECTRA is in its 12th year right now. And then the journal, our goal really is to put together the most cohesive journal that we can. However, it's a theory journal, an interdisciplinary journal, and so it covers everything from political theory, from which the co-editor and I this year happen to be, researching, and that's our areas of expertise, but to art pieces, to commentaries. We have a fantastic piece that was submitted on museum viewership and the way in which the actual curation process creates a visitation experience. So one of our goals is to continue to try to bring in folks that are outside of the political theory space. The journal tends to skew heavy towards that disciplinary home simply because of its editors, and we're trying to expand that reach. I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's probably our biggest goal. Our role as editors is the same as any other editor. We review the initial pieces, work through the process of review. We have a fantastic liaison in the Virginia Tech Library who I believe does a lot of the same work that Miranda was just describing for us. And I believe he's actually speaking here at the conference tomorrow. And so we're very fortunate that we do not have to deal with the back end of our system, and I do not believe that Chris nor I would be able to without Jason's fantastic support. Yeah, so it's a little bit about Spectra. Thank you.
I can go last. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for hosting us. My name is Tyler Myers. I am the editor-in-chief for Pursuit, which is the undergraduate research journal at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, but also serves the other institutions within the UT system, as well as any other student who studies at UT for like a summer or fellowship or whatever, and they decide they want to end up publishing through our system. Our goal is really to provide an accessible, collaborative, multidisciplinary space for undergrads to submit their research for publication and really just try to dismantle some of the barriers that may exist otherwise for them to make their publications, while still providing a review process for both peer review and faculty review. So as editor-in-chief, my big responsibility is trying to recruit a lot of those students and faculty to serve in the role of faculty or peer review, as well as try to serve as the yes man around campus, trying to get students to publish within our journal. And that's really one of our big goals right now. Is we've existed for about 15 years now, since 2008. But following the COVID-19 pandemic, we definitely kind of fell underneath the shadows, and a lot of students sort of forgot that we are a resource for students. We work really closely with our Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships to increase our accessibility, but that's one of our big goals. I'm leaving that position in about 2 weeks when I graduate, but our next editor-in-chief will be taking the reins, and I'm really excited to see what she'll be doing.
Great, thanks so much, guys. It's really interesting to hear all the different disciplines that you guys cover. And a few of you already touched on this a little bit, but if you guys could talk a little bit about what sort of support or funding you receive from your respective institutions, departments, or professors, and has there been any change in the support you have received over the years, or something that you wish was different in terms of the support that you receive? We can go in the same order if somebody wants to kick us off.
Sure, I can go ahead. The University of Illinois provides us up to $5,000 of funding through our student organizations. So each student organization will get up to $5,000. That being said, we also have additional funding through our Office of Undergraduate Research, which took some time to acquire just due to administrative purposes. But we do have supportive funding from there, as well as our faculty who are on our board, letting us know of specific grants as well as scholarship opportunities for us to use for printing purposes and advertisement purposes as well.
I don't want to cut you off, Merinda, if you have anything you want to. No, okay, perfect. Then I'll jump in. So we're really fortunate that Spectra is structurally part of the institution, and so the budget for its regular running is actually managed by the Library Research Services Office. We've been fortunate that we don't have to worry about that being, approved on a year-to-year basis. We get some additional funding from the Aspect department for things like postcards, some, kind of small advertising, and then a little bit of pay for the editors each year. The position is mostly a volunteer position, and it is just the two editors. And then anytime we ask for reviewers, it is a volunteer-based thing. So there's no compensation. In that sense, support has been stable for us in a really convenient way. We don't have to worry about grants. We get a lot of support, though, in terms of the effort and the time that faculty put into this. So we, 2 years ago, centralized a editorial board, and everyone on that board committed to review at least one article for Spectra a year as a peer reviewer. And that has been incredibly useful to have a pool of almost 25 or so folks who are committed to taking on at least one piece for us each year. And then we have a advisory board right here in the department. And so our editorial board is all over the world, tenured faculty at a whole bunch of different institutions. Our advisory board are 3 of the core folks in our Aspect department, and they're here to help the editors with any contentious decisions, trying to decide who should take the positions after us. Spectra is just, the editors are just 2 people, and so we just sort of unilaterally decide who gets to come after us. And so we turn to our advisory board for that sort of continuity support. And then the advisory board also gives us insight on, just managing the sort of day-to-day things of the journal, We were very fortunate in the last year and now again this year that the advisory board was actually able to ask the departments that their homes are in, their faculty homes, for a little bit of funding to offer an award to incentivize folks to submit to the journal. So that was one of the great benefits they were able to bring this last year and this year now.
Our costs overall are relatively minimal. Kind of like Spectra, we don't compensate our reviewers or editors, anything like that. It's entirely volunteer based. Go Vols. So if we do incur costs, those are usually covered by the university, just because we work so closely through the Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships. Additionally, a lot of our logistical support comes through what's called the Tennessee Research and Creative Exchange, or TRACE, which provides a lot of some financial support, but mostly just like technical support in the background. Really just make sure we run smoothly. And so that's a really immense resource for allowing our authors to also submit their work for free. They don't have to incur any cost of the publication process, and their work becomes open source for anybody around the world to observe and download. So that's a really, really fantastic resource that we get to take advantage of at our university. And then the last sort of avenue that we can pursue for funding if needed. Again, we're pretty stable. We haven't had any funding issues for the most part. We are a registered organization through what's called the Center for Student Engagement here on campus. That's sort of like the master group that controls funding and logistical support for any student organization here on campus, of which we have like over 600. And so it's a pretty large organization, but that allows us to apply for grant funding, advertise at their club fairs, participate in leadership development trainings, stuff like that. So we have a lot of different avenues through which we could seek funding if necessary.
Great, thank you guys. And next question, sort of in the same vein, but what does collaboration look like for your journal, both on campus and off campus? And what relationships have you had with other journals or organizations that have allowed you to grow and evolve?
Yeah, so when me and my co-founder were first starting the Illinois Student Undergraduate Research Journal, we did to a hand undergraduate research journal, sociology journal, Harvard. And so through them, we got to understand their positives, and through that we became and we developed our own constitution, our journal as a whole. We brought that structure and proposed that to the Office of Undergraduate Research, and they were very willing to support us in whatever endeavors we had. But we needed to prove that professors on campus were also interested in helping our pursuit. And so we also developed an advisory board made up of faculty, as well as reached out to Merinda and the university library to help us with the peer review process, publishing, as well as the print publication company.
Thanks, Dipankar. From a librarian's point of view, it's important for me that the subject liaison librarians are aware of what the authors are publishing in the journal, and to try and involve the subject liaisons as much as possible. So this can look in several different directions. It might be helping students with the research process. It might be helping them find research-related materials. It might be answering disciplinary questions around methodology. And so making sure that those disciplinary librarians know what's happening with the journal and that they are working with students is really important, I think, for the success of the journal long term. As far as collaborations go outside of the University of Illinois, I do look to my fellow institutions, especially larger research institutions, to make sure that our journals are professionalizing themselves in ways that very closely mirror what professional journals look like. So that means things like assigning DOIs, adding each journal to the library catalog, which makes sure that it ends up in the WorldCat catalog, which is the largest catalog. So my goal here is to make sure that we're professionalizing as much as possible and to understand what the issues are that other institutions are facing, and then trying to find answers together to support the student journals in the long term.
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit about some of the individual collaborations that we've built with our advisory boards, our editorial boards. So those are, of course, essential to the daily running of the journal. Spectra would not be publishable if we weren't peer reviewed. We need those folks to do that work. And then in terms of our relationship with the library, also essential. Spectra goes down if we do not have our collaboration with our librarian and the wonderful work that they do. It's all open source, it's only digital, and so we need that help and that support maintaining that platform, and of course, maintaining the journal's DOI. We haven't had a lot of other relationships with organizations. So one of the connections that we do have is the International Studies Association, or ISA, in the field of political science, always lets us bring in our materials, so those postcards that I mentioned earlier, and bring them to tabling events for ISA's main conference in the spring. This is great. It gives us a chance to branch out, get other folks who don't know about Spectra involved. You know, maybe they want to submit something, maybe they're willing to serve as one of our editors or reviewers. This is also where we've run into our problem of getting more political theory pieces or political pieces, even though we are, as I just threw in the chat, a social, political, ethical, and cultural theory journal. And so this really interdisciplinary social science journal. And the trick with that is simply that the last several rounds of editors have been political science students. And so we're all getting these PhDs. Those are the conferences we go to. These are the people we know. And the journal has taken on that same reflection. So one of the things that we're trying to grow currently is some relationships with some Virginia Tech departments to try to get them, even not in their capacity as particularly editors with Spectra, but as connected to Spectra by virtue of being in Virginia Tech, bringing information to their conferences so that we can kind of grow there. But it's mostly that interpersonal collaboration that we're working through.
Pretty much all of our collaborations are campus bound. We haven't had a lot of opportunities to interact with other bodies outside of the university, because that's one of the big points of like attending this conference. Very excited to try to collaborate with other people and see where we can learn and grow through our own organization. But on campus, one of our biggest partners is sort of our sister organization within the Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships, which is Undergraduate Research Ambassadors, or URA. So it's a group of students who they kind of mentor other students through the process of getting involved in labs or in research groups, publishing their work, working towards thesis or capstone projects on campus. And they've been really, really helpful in trying to get our name out there, really trying to publicize the work that we do. Actually, the current president of URA will serve as the editor-in-chief for Pursuit next year. So I'm really excited to see that high level of overlap between our two organizations. And then the other big collaboration is with that TRACE group that I mentioned earlier, the Tennessee Research and Creative Exchange. They provide our DOIs, they maintain our website, they help us format everything for publication. So they've been really essential. And they span across the UT system. So not just UT Knoxville, but yeah, really appreciate the support we've received from those two main organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And now turning more towards within your own journals, how have members and faculty who are involved in your publication supported each other through the writing and publication process?
Sure. So for ILSurge, we reach out to the university library to help us and guide us through the peer review process. We wanted to make sure that our peer review process was officiated by, faculty who have gone through this process over and over and over again. And so through that, we've developed our structure for the years to come. But as far as mentorship and guidance for undergraduates, we have graduate students who have been referred by our faculty advisory board to help guide us and help guide the undergraduate students who are new to our journal itself in how to review a new article, how to review manuscripts outside the scope of their own study. And so that kind of helps us guide through the official process. But then after that, we take it a step further and send it out to graduate students to review. And then we send it out to additional faculty for additional review. Then we gather all those edits, send them back to the manuscript author, and we keep continuing that process until we've had a finalized paper. Outside of that, we've had support through what additional edits or what additional changes we can make to the journal itself, whether that be the timeline, whether that be the structure of the journal itself, as well as through the print publication. The printing company has been a great help for us, especially when it came to deciding how to structure our journal as a whole, and get those print publications out to the journal body. Because we planned on printing 200 to 300 journals each year, we need a large amount of funding, and so they helped us with ensuring that our journal looked pristine, while also cutting down costs that our journal couldn't have.
Yeah, so I'll focus first on the writing process bit. So we often have a lot of submissions, despite being open to, anyone at the graduate level or above. A lot of our submissions are from here in Virginia Tech. That is kind of the norm. So we do work closely with the faculty in those affiliated departments, broadly the social science, master's and PhD programs, over these last 12 years, and just kind of in the summer checking in with folks, reintroducing SPECTRA, and asking the faculty to really take notice of the types of papers their students are producing in those classes and potentially recommending SPECTRA as an avenue for those papers. For a lot of our folks who submit, it is their first publication, and particularly, their first kind of non-co-authored publication, oftentimes their first solo publication, with the exception of a few of our tenured faculty who submit pieces, frankly, because they're being very, very kind to SPECTRA. So we ask the faculty to step in a bit there and kind of walk them through those early stages of the writing process and that distinction between what makes something a class paper and what makes something a publishable research paper. And then once we get it, then we move on to that publication half of it. And it sounds quite similar to that review process. But yeah, we take a look at it as the editors first, determine whether or not it fits the scope of the journal, determine whether or not the piece is ready to go to review even, or whether or not it needs revisions before review. So that revise and resubmit category that's so famous. We go through that initial process with the authors ourselves. If the piece is ready for review, then we go ahead and tap those folks that have volunteered to lead at least one piece for us, see what they are interested in, kind of where their expertise lies, match up our pieces submitted to our reviewers the best we can. And that usual process, right? Getting that double-blind peer review, sending it back, getting their edits, making sure that's going through the correct way, depending on the scope of the edits, and then the formatting, the actual publication. Again, it's all digital, but all of those components are done with our library and their fantastic support. So we help with the sort of design features of it, but they really implement it into the system for us.
Sounds like we follow a lot of very similar strategies in our publication process. We sort of do 2 layers of review, like I mentioned earlier, one that's peer review and one that is faculty review. When we receive a manuscript from a student who wishes to publish, I, as editor-in-chief, usually give it a quick look over, make sure it fits the general criteria for publication. Does it tell a story? Does it have a hypothesis, introduction, methods, conclusion, all the things that are necessary for a valid publication? That manuscript then gets passed along to our managing editor, who assigns usually 3 or 4 student peer reviewers who have been trained on reviewing peer articles, to do a double-blind review of the work, and mostly looking for grammar and like some minor aspects of content, just to make sure we have like a cohesive paper that either gets accepted with minor revisions, requesting major revisions, or it doesn't get accepted at all. And so if a paper is accepted with minor revisions, that draft gets sent back to them with the revisions that they're expected to make, in which then at that point, our research editor is searching for a faculty from some field that's relatively relevant to the work that they are doing on campus, or maybe off campus, but usually on campus, to conduct a faculty review. And we usually give them a couple of weeks to form that review, provide a cover page with their recommendations and their requested revisions. That then goes back to the student author and then it comes back to me, and there's a lot of back and forth, but I mean, that's a part of publication, right? So once those processes are done, we're ready for publication. But that whole process, we're always looking on the support for our faculty reviewers from all over campus. And we're looking for students from across a wide variety of backgrounds be able to participate in the journal as reviewers. We have sort of a list of reviewers that we have on standby at all times. They have the trainings, they have all of the things that they should need to do a successful review. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to hear about the different editing processes that you guys all have. And this is kind of to build off of the last question, but overall, what role does your journal play on your campus? And how do you approach incoming students or students who are involved in research and encourage them to support your journal, or if they have in the past, to continue working with you guys?
Of course. So for IlSurge, our whole purpose is to guide and promote collaboration and curiosity amongst a disciplinary undergraduate research body. So not only including the sciences, but humanities, social sciences, arts, ensuring that everyone feels like they can discover or um, collaborate in a new aspect outside the sciences because that's a very dominant aspect of research. And so when it comes to the role our journal plays, we try to focus on the undergraduate body, ensuring that they feel competent when it comes to research. They feel proud of being involved in research on our campus, but also not shying away from graduate school or even being involved in research as a freshman or sophomore, new to the whole aspect of research work as a whole. So that being said, when it came to approaching incoming students, a lot of them were scared of joining a research journal because they didn't know how to read a research article or didn't know the aspect of, conducting research by themselves. So we had our undergraduate library host sessions for students to learn about peer review, learn about how to read a research article so that they felt competent in the basics of reading a research article. And then through our sessions, we had students pick out an article or two and read it themselves, review it, and then break it down with them with our mentors to see where they were lacking in what to identify for potential edits or whatnot. And then because we are a new journal, it took us a lot of time to recruit students, not only for submitting manuscripts, but also for editing and the peer review process as a whole. But as uh, since this is our now second year of functioning as a journal, we've had the Office of Undergraduate Research promote our journal through their website as well. And so students have another outlet for finding research opportunities. Whether or not they're a freshman or sophomore, junior, senior, they can always be involved with the journal itself, whether or not they're involved in research by themselves individually.
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer, Dipankar, and trying to figure out how to get undergraduate students involved in research as early as possible in their undergraduate career because they don't have that much time to figure out how to do that. And then in turn, figure out how to publish their work in some way. So my role as a librarian is to try and find as many outlets as possible for students to share their work in a creative way. So we have several disciplinary journals, but they're by no means covers every discipline at our institution. So that's why the journal that Dipankar's been working on is so important to us, is because it covers everything. And we're hoping that down the road, that journal will also include video and audio, not just written manuscripts. But also one of the strategies that I've had is a lot of students actually find me because of our website. And so I meet with individual students to help them find a good avenue for sharing their work. And while that includes campus activities around Undergraduate Research Week in the spring, I also try to point them to other journals that are nationally published. For example, there's a great economics journal that's published by Illinois Wesleyan University, which is about an hour from us, but it gives students other opportunities to publish, maybe not at Illinois, but with another student journal. So my goal is to make sure that students have as many opportunities to share their work as possible, and that includes national and sometimes even international journals.
Yeah, so I think given that we're graduate focused journal, there's a little bit of a difference here in that everyone who's submitting to us typically is either already a PhD student or PhD track or just got their PhD. Like that's most of our submitters. The publication is the coin of the realm, as my advisor says all the time. They know they need to do this. Most of us are intending to get academic positions after we finish our PhDs. This is the job, so to speak. So on one hand, that makes that process easier for us. There's already that buy-in, there's already that sort of knowledge coming into this. You're going to need to publish. And we end up sort of looking like the friendly face. Hey, we're here, you know us, the editors are in your class, you can check in with Spectra. It makes that collaboration process on campus much easier for folks. Like I said, a lot of the submissions we get are first-time publications for these graduate students. And so we sort of become that introductory journal that a lot of folks can turn to as someone they know will take their work seriously, and somewhere that is often sympathetic to those completely theoretical questions. And so that's one of the big distinctions with Spectra, that we are a theory journal first and foremost, and we find that that separation really helps students in both our program aspect, but also more broadly, some of the theory programs here at Virginia Tech feel at home in the journal. They aren't being asked where exactly are your, technical methods. Tell us what the statistics are. No, if you didn't use quantitative methods, great. We don't care. Come on and tell us about the theory. Work through the philosophy of this. And so it is much more open in that sense. And that relationship with professors has really helped build that connection early on for students. And then, of course, just that default knowledge that they're here to be academics. We're here to be academics. We all kind of know what we're getting ourselves into by the point we're here.
Yeah, so I'll answer that question kind of in two parts. One in terms of recruitment and for publication, and one in terms of recruitment for our actual reviewers and how do we get students on board for the review process. So I'll start there. At the University of Tennessee, all students have to take 2 semesters at least of writing intensive coursework, really 3, but some students AP out. And those writing intensive courses provide opportunities for students to both engage in peer review and to not publish, but to generate literary research that's based on literary analysis. And so for those 2 reasons, we feel that any student at UT is capable of serving as a reviewer. And we really try to drive that home and make this as accessible as an opportunity as possible for our students, and really demonstrate that this is supposed to be a learning opportunity for them, especially if they are interested in going to grad school or if they are interested in engaging in research for their life. Knowing how the process of communicating that research is really important, and checking the validity of that research is really important. So through that mechanism, we are trying to be very present on campus through flyers that we produce, or going to speak with the Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships at different seminars that they host, or with different departmental groups who bring in students over the summer, or really flagging down students who are engaging in research already to our major research symposia, of which we have a ton in the spring semester that we're able to go to. Now, in terms of publication, that kind of ties into that second part. Our Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships is constantly scanning for our students across campus to see what kind of work that they're involved in, hosting meetings, hosting seminars, hosting presentation sessions for students to come demonstrate their work. And those provide opportunities for them to refer them to us for publication. And so we tend to have a pretty steady flow of students who are either interested in serving as a reviewer or who are interested in publishing their work. And then from there, it's just a matter of conversation, like, oh, well, how much time do you have throughout your week to do the training and then engage in thoughtful peer review at least 1 or 2 times a semester? Or what kind of timeline are you expecting for publication? How many months do you think this is going to take? And then once we set those expectations, we usually go from there in terms of either reviewership or publication.
Yeah, great. It's really important to have those multiple points of reference on campus, and it seems like all of you guys are doing a fantastic job at that. So this will be my second to last question before we turn to the audience for any questions that they have. In terms of the long-term goals that you have for your journal, how do you see the relationships that you have built on campus, off campus, aiding in those goals?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. So like I mentioned before, ILSurge is a multidisciplinary research journal for undergraduates on our campus. I think our big goal is to ensure that all students across campus know that research isn't exclusive to STEM. You can be in business field, you can be in economics, you can be in whatever, and still have curiosity in that field. Pursuing your own independent research or under a faculty, we're promoting students to be involved with research. So our whole journal is aimed to help students with their curiosity and collaborative aspect. And so I think the relationships that we have with our faculty advisory board in all disciplines, as well as the undergraduate library or the university library, as well as the Office of Undergraduate Research, has definitely solidified our presence in the community. That being said, we're still working on the continuity part of our journal, and transitioning from one board to another board of students is a little difficult, as we did see this past semester with me graduating in December. But we are very lucky to have advisors and faculty that are very hands-on with our journal, and are always looking out for us whether or not we have any hiccups in the road ahead of us.
Yeah, Dipankar, that's right. One of the weakest points that I've noticed about undergraduate journals over time is the lack of a succession plan. And even with the best intentions, sometimes things kind of fall by the wayside. And so my goal for this journal and for our other journals as well is to make sure that a succession plan is in place and that undergraduates, first and second year students, are brought into the structure of the journal itself as editors or copy editors, doing outreach so that they can get used to the behind the scenes way that the journal operates so that they can take the helm as students graduate. And this is common across all institutions, even with really good faculty member support. This seems to be an issue. And I know this in part because I did a research project about a decade ago where we looked for as many undergraduate research journals as we could find, and a lot of them existed online but didn't exist anymore. They had been discontinued at some point. And I'm redoing that research project right now, and we're looking for those same journals that existed a decade ago. And as best as I can tell, at least a quarter of them do not exist anymore. And you know, this is true even with professional journals. It takes a lot of effort, and professional journals will pay editors even to keep them in their roles and to provide that structure. So for undergraduates, it's really coming from their interest to publish what they are hoping to accomplish to get to graduate school, for example. So finding ways to bring undergraduates in early on to that structure so that there's a clear succession plan and that we have constant conversations about that are really important. So that's my primary goal for the coming years.
I think Spectra's got two sort of major goals over the next few years. One is trying to recover from the slump we saw with submissions and interest post-COVID. Like I said, the journal's about 12 years old, so it was doing incredibly strong, you know, up in terms of submissions, attention, volunteer time. COVID took a year off, people paused, you know, wasn't sure what was happening, and then it just is kind of limping through its recovery. We are really excited that this year we got pretty close to the same number of submissions we got in those pre-COVID years. So we're really proud of that and excited about that. Seems to be starting to come back. But that's been one, and trying to continue those relationships with the advisory board. And that's where the idea for the advisory board came from, was hoping that we could bring in all these people, not only who are helping review, but are there to tell their students, their friends, their colleagues about the journal. And so having some more friendly faces all over the world. And I think that's really paid off. You know, we especially saw that this year. So we're very excited about that. And certainly the advisory board just continues to grow. So the goal with that is that folks serve for at least 3 years, and then we try to replace them, you know, one after the other as they leave. And that's worked well so far, knock on wood. And then the other goal, like I mentioned earlier, was trying to get a little bit out of our home by staying, you know, we're all those editors in the past, we've been so political theory focused, so much from the political science department, trying to pull ourselves out a little bit and make sure that we're really bringing in all those other components of Spectra. And we always have a few submissions here, a few submissions there, but really trying to make that a more equitable distribution of the submissions. Really, our main solution to that is the succession question, right? If the editors are always coming from political science, they're always going to ISA. We're always sending emails to the other political science people we know, right? Like we all exist in these kind of silos. So one of the things that we did was we were just really specific. We've just picked our successors just last week. And so we were really specific that one of them can't be political science. We have got to get someone outside of our own field here. And so one of the other aspect students, just a year behind me, she's in the religion and culture department, and she has so kindly agreed to take this on. And so now we have one political science person and one religion and culture person, and we're excited to get some more footing in the religion and culture space now.
I'll make my answer super quick because I do need to hop off for another meeting. But one of our biggest areas of growth right now, I think, is very similar to everyone else. We're just trying to grow, trying to rebound from what we saw during COVID. We have a lot of opportunities to connect with students all across campus in a variety of different fields and really serve our mission of being a multidisciplinary journal that promotes accessibility for publication and learning about the publication process. And so really just staying true to that mission is going to be our biggest goal and making sure that we reach as many students as possible across UT.
Great, thank you so much, all of you. Tyler, thank you for joining us. I know you have to go, so thank you for sharing about your journal. It was very helpful to learn about it. And my last question for you guys is, what is your favorite part of your journal? What's like a favorite memory that you've had, or maybe like specific piece that you've worked on? Would love to hear from each of you.
I think the favorite part of the journal for me is the friendships that people make through our journal itself. You often find kids from various backgrounds and various studies all of a sudden collaborating on a specific paper, and they're so passionate about it in such a unique way. Uh, for me personally, I think it's rewarding to see that students are so engaged in it that they want to stay past our meeting time to kind of talk about the paper and kind of talk about each other's lives and whatnot. That's a big part of our journal, and I think that's very important when it comes to the continuity part of it, to have friends within the journal itself so that they feel like they're invested in it more than just the journal, but as a family as a whole.
Yeah, that is a common thread that I've seen with the journals that I've helped with. And my favorite part is actually reading the articles. I didn't get a chance to do undergraduate research when I was an undergrad. I got my degree in political science, and I really wish I had. So reading the work that students are doing and seeing the complexity of the questions that they're asking and the creativity with which they're answering those questions, and their relationships with graduate students and faculty, and seeing that flourish into work that is a huge contribution to disciplines. And so for me, that's the most exciting part, is to read the students' work.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I could echo what's already been said. Like those pieces are so rewarding and such a great moment. In particular, one of my favorite things about Spectra is the cover art has always been done by one of the other Aspect graduate students. And so for the last, not always, for the last 5 years, so as long as I've been involved in it or known about it in any capacity, Eileen has been doing the art for us, and she's a fantastic artist, and the pieces she creates are so provocative and emotional and engaging and just really capture the kind of moment that she's thinking about. And then she provides, the beautiful analysis to go along with the art pieces. She graduates this year, so we're quite sad that we're going to lose her, actually. But that's been one of the just kind of beautiful moments of working with the piece, is to see those cover art, to see that continuity year after year, and to see they're all part of her research portfolio. She kind of is working towards an arts degree. And so seeing her own kind of relationship to the art and to research growth through that cover art and having that relationship with her has been phenomenal.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing. And those are all the questions that I have, but I saw that there were a few in the Q&A box, so I will just read those aloud now. If anybody else in the audience has questions, feel free to drop them there. The first one was from Emmy. Emmy says, I'm based in the UK, where it is not common to have a department of undergraduate research, and there is no funding from the department or journal services itself. So would you be able to talk more about external sources of funding from outside of your university? Either of you have any advice on that question?
I can jump on first. I don't have an answer, unfortunately, and I would love to know if other journals are finding external funding outside their institution, because I'm not aware of any. And I think that funding is, although undergraduate journals don't need a lot of funding, they do need some, especially if they decide they want to print. So the one place I know that we found some for ours, and Dipankar can talk more about this, is the Research Park folks will donate money to the journal. And I think that's helped with some of the printing costs, but that's also an affiliated part of the university.
Yeah, of course. Our research park is very well connected with our university, and they want to see students flourish, especially in the research aspect, because we're a great pipeline to their companies. Um, I would suggest if you're looking into digital publication, I think support for funding is not as important as support from your faculty itself. I think the funding aspect can be raised either through fundraisers on campus or through donations made by friends and family, because that's what we relied on for the first, I'd say, 4 or 5 months until we figured out funding through our university. Getting the structure down, I think, is way more important than funding is. I'm not very sure as to the cost for operations for the journal in UK, but a lot of our resources are free through our university, so we didn't have many issues with the minimal costs. And whatever minimal costs we had were through donations through our friends and family or parents.
I don't have a great answer to this, but I would consider chatting with your faculty about the professional organizations that they're a part of. So I mentioned like ISA lets us bring some materials to share at their tabling events during the conference. We don't ask for money from ISA, but they do have grants, and I do know other organizations like AERA, American Education Research Association or something like that. All have these sort of small professional and research grants. And so it's possible, depending on your department or whether you want to be disciplinary, interdisciplinary, that your faculty, who are probably already a part of a lot of these professional organizations, might know who's got money, who doesn't, who offers this type of grant, who doesn't. And that might be a place to start those professional orgs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I saw that John maybe wanted to jump in on this question, maybe with some advice.
Well, I don't know if I really have advice. I will mention that we just formed a committee on funding and grant writing just recently for our journal, and we're starting a new university press at GW, which I'll mention later. But so we have a new committee looking at that. I don't know that there's a ton of external funding, but in my experience, most grants and external funding are not for ongoing costs, but for specific projects. So maybe getting started, or maybe, digitizing old issues, things like that, but not usually for ongoing costs. Yeah.
All right, thank you, John. And then I saw we had another question that Merinda touched on a little bit. Someone said, maybe I missed this, but how many of your student journals print paper issues, or does the funding for that printing costs come from? I myself know that printing can be quite expensive, so I'd love to hear, how exactly you guys secure that funding.
All the journals that we've worked with at Illinois, the one that Dipankar started is the only one that has printed in print, except for the honors journal, because the students write poems and do drawings and whatnot. And so they have a print run every spring as well. But being able to save money by printing online seems to be one of the ways that really has helped undergraduate research journals flourish, really, because there isn't too many costs involved. I'd be interested to hear about others' experiences printing, and I'll hand it over to Dipankar to say more about ours.
I don't have much to say. I will say our first thoughts when starting up the Ill Search Journal was um, we had to do it all digitally because we couldn't raise enough money for 200 or 300, however many copies that we needed. Um, but we did have the means to print eventually, and that was a very great blessing for us because a lot more students came to know about the journal simply by handing out 200, 300 throughout the campus, and people just kind of taking a look at it briefly. But as far as the funding, I think that printing may be a little excessive in this digital era. Everyone has phones now, everyone's on their computers, no one's really carrying around anything physical, especially textbooks and whatnot. So I think getting your administration or whoever has the main page for your institution to put your journal there would be a great way to promote your journal.
Yeah, so Spectra has been digital since its inception. So I really can't speak to printing costs, but I can say that being digital does not prevent promotion. We're able to do exactly what Dipankar and I was just mentioning, being able to link things on various pages for the website, our program website, but also affiliates, social media. So it doesn't have to be print to be promoted, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't know how much it costs to print anything.
Let me just add in here. One thing that I have noticed, just from being around student journals, it seems that a lot of the literary journals tend to print maybe more often, and I think the contributors want to have like a copy of it, and so maybe they don't print like tons, but they print enough for all the students. So I've seen that a little bit more in literary journals than research journals overall.
There are some good reasons to have a print run, including when we have students visiting campus to decide if they want to attend the University of Illinois or not. So I think even if you don't have a print run, finding ways to create a flyer to give to the department so that they can give to an alumni or visiting students or family or whatever can be really helpful in promoting the journal, but also directing folks to read it easily through a QR code or an easy URL or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of a follow-up question that I have for Dipankar, because I'm interested as a new publication, being able to print is a massive accomplishment. How did you come to estimating that you needed like 200 to 300 print copies, I think you said? And then were you intending to distribute them to like contributors or to staff? Or, was there like a specific audience that you're looking to perhaps give those physical copies to?
Yeah, so we work with the premier publishing group near our campus. And so we sat down with them to kind of discuss the dimensions and the specifications we wanted for our journal itself. They broke down each of the costs associated with the different types of textures and the journal covers and how many pages each, like how many pages our journal would cost per page. So that was almost an hour and a half discussion with two of their members. And through that, we kind of worked with them, emailed back and forth to kind of discuss how many we could afford with our $4,000 to $5,000 budget. Uh, that being said, the overall process probably took around 2.5 weeks. The printing took most of the time, but the back and forth communication was very easy, very convenient for us, especially as students who couldn't travel back and forth to the journal or to the printing company itself. As far as dissemination of our journal, we had, like I mentioned, maybe 250 copies. We gave all of our members a copy as well as our faculty advisory board. And then we handed the rest of them to our Office of Undergraduate Research for them to disseminate throughout campus, whether that be through the research park facilities or our multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary buildings such as the IGB or the NCSA building.
Absolutely, thank you. And then, Elhom, I'm curious about, running the website. Is that the responsibility that falls on both of you two editors, or is that, kind of like an external position? And do you have any recommendations for running a website for a publication, especially because we're in
Yeah.
this more digital era?
Yeah, absolutely. So the content of the website is our responsibility as editors. The platform itself is still over with the library, and it's tied into the actual platform in which folks submit. We do all of our peer reviews through the platform and the publication. So it's all tied together. I'm not sure what the technical platform is called, but I know it's the one that's used for all of the journals here at Virginia Tech. So it's a well-established, like massive sort of infrastructure. The content is something we do cover ourselves. It's more straightforward than you'd think in the sense that you go to other journals and you say, what do you got on your website and what's over there and what do we need? And so that was really how it started. To my knowledge, you know, again, 12 years ago, I was not here 12 years ago. But they basically pulled a whole bunch of journals in the fields and said, okay, this is what social science journals look like when they're disciplinary. This is what they look like interdisciplinary. These are sort of the subpages we need. And then we make sure we audit it pretty regularly. So we try to do the major overhauls right as the semester ends. And so getting those over to Jason, who, yes, you will hear from tomorrow. Thank you, John. And he will go through and kind of sub in whatever we've asked. Hey, remove this, or can we change this, or update that link? And so we do that usually at the end of each semester, but just keeping an eye on it and making sure that everything is running smoothly. We try not to overcrowd the site. I think this is one of those things that, partly by virtue of us being PhD students ourselves, we have other things that are going on. You know, we don't have a ton of time to like write a blog for the website. So it stays quite simple. And that simplicity really is a major benefit because you go on the SPECTRA website, you know, I linked it earlier. You find the call for papers, you find the previous editions, you find our editorial board, you find the advisory boards. Everything is just sort of sorted into its spot. And that's really the biggest trick, just making sure you know where everything is and what it looks like from the user side. If someone had never seen a journal site before, can they figure out where they need to go? We do the QR code thing, those flyers I mentioned that we take to conferences, that we give to faculty. QR codes for everything, man. Love those QR codes. They're a big hit. People use them. That's where most of the traffic for the journal comes from. So that's been really important as well, making sure that those QR codes are up to date and that everything does work in that transition from a print material to your digital space. That has got to be seamless.
I have an additional question if we have time. But first, I also wanted to just acknowledge Merinda. Merinda mentioned this earlier. She did a lot of research on student journals that was really an inspiration to me in launching this conference and to our co-organizers and working on this. We relied on her research quite a bit, so I want to acknowledge that. But my question is. Elhom, you mentioned the ISA conference, and I was wondering about if any of you attend, conferences at your university, like maybe teaching day or research days, things like that. GW just recently had a couple different research days, and I was wondering if you are involved in those kind of things as well at your university.
Yeah, I can. So ILSurge is very involved with all the research that goes on and all the research symposiums that happen. We have an engineering open house that we attend all the time. We have an undergraduate research symposium that happens once a year. But we also have events that happen before school starts that we typically try to attend, as well as virtual conferences and whatnot, just to let professors know, hey, we're out here. Feel free to refer your students to us, or just grab a book and see what we're about. And they typically will reach out to us again and say, hey, we would like to join, or hey, we'd like to refer you to X, Y, and Z. And so through word of mouth, we've been able to reach a lot of our campus.
I can jump in. So because we don't take undergraduate student publications, we don't attend the larger Virginia Tech events. So we do, however, attend, whatever conferences the editors are going to that year. We always take materials. We ask everyone on that faculty advisory board, so the folks here at Virginia Tech, to take materials to any conferences they're going to. And then there are a couple of conferences here, both the Aspect Departments Conference specifically, or not both, it's more than two, but the Aspect Conference Department, and then the Women and Gender Studies has an annual conference. Our History Department has an annual conference. And if there are conferences coming to Tech, just last year, for example, APT, American Political Theory, was on Virginia Tech's campus. And so we always try to make sure we're in touch with those folks, and anyone who's got, graduate or above level of research conference going on. We send over some of those postcards. We offer to introduce ourselves, ask if we can help with any tabling or anything that they might be doing writ large for the conference, and then we show up whenever we can. For the most part, everyone's been incredibly receptive. The Aspect Conference, of course, by nature of being directly affiliated with SPECTRA, we even do an interview with the guest speaker, the plenary speaker that they bring to campus for that conference. And so we then publish that interview in our Talk with the Editors section of the journal.
Excellent, thanks. You mentioned ISA, which I've been to several times. If you haven't gone to it, you might also try the APSA conference as well. That's another good one. Well, any other questions from the audience or you, Breanna, or our other moderators? If not, we'll take a brief break. Not much of a break. Our next presentation session will be at 1:15, so just about 5 minutes. So Breanna, I'll let you thank our first panelists, and we'll move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for chatting with me about your respective journals. I had a really great time learning about all of them. Everyone in the audience, please check out the links in the chat where you can see the websites of each of the journals. And we look forward to seeing you for the rest of the symposium. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.